any scenario is a man compared to a woman.
And why is that?
Because men are biologically stronger and are better in physical combat.
Okay, for sure. So we're talking about biological strength. Sure, I agree that men on average are biologically stronger than women on average.
No, not on average. Men are biologically stronger. That's a fact.
So it's not a fact that's true in 100% of scenarios.
On average, it's true.
It's not always true.
If you were to take...
Also, Dean, I have a point that I wanted to see him respond to real quick. James, if Kamala Harris were in Donald Trump's body and Donald Trump were in Kamala Harris's body, who would you rather vote for? If Kamala Harris were in Donald Trump's body and Donald Trump were in Kamala Harris's body, who would you rather vote for?
I mean, I can't say give you a definitive answer because of the fact that I think their values and policies will change based on how they.
No, let me just clarify. It's Kamala Harris, right? But Donald Trump's consciousness is put in Kamala Harris's body, right? Or Kamala Harris's consciousness put in Donald Trump's body, or Donald Trump's consciousness put in Kamala Harris's body. Does that make sense?
So, as if the only thing that swapped was the body.
It's just the consciousness.
But the respective minds were.
Yeah. Have you ever watched Freaky Friday?
No.
Okay. Just the point is that the consciousness swaps bodies.
Okay. I think that if Kamala Harris were able to carry herself in the way that Donald Trump does, and give all of her points in the same way, then I think maybe I would lean towards Kamala Harris.
But she's not. But under your view, she's still a woman, right? Like Donald Trump is in the body of a woman. Under your view, if the reason why you didn't vote for a woman is because of literally biologically who she is, then wouldn't you just say that you wouldn't vote for Trump in that scenario, and instead you'd rather vote for Harris in Trump's body?
No, because I think the way that she carries herself and the way that her values are reflected would be different if she was a man instead of a female.
No. We're assuming in this hypothetical no change in their values at all. They stay the exact same. All you do is you swap consciousness.
Then I would probably say so because, I mean, I feel that policy-wise, even though I may agree with, let's say, Trump's consciousness, the way that he portrays them, I feel like the general public, including myself, will not be attracted to that or drawn toward that. So that, I guess then in that scenario, even though I would maybe not as much agree with their consciousness policies, the very consciousness carries, I would still lean towards that because the way that she's able to carry yourself in a way that's more that's affirmative.
Yeah, I'm talking to that mumbo jumbo. How could it be one of those conflicts during the middle generation?
I got you. So the point I was just making is that literally there's no particular trait that is different about them, and you're saying that you would answer different. So it's not specifically biologically as an individual that's relevant. It's literally simply just the fact that
are different about men and women.
What's up?
I said that the fact that you said that there's actually no different traits is actually false because of the concept of all different traits and how they carry themselves.
Yeah, you didn't understand what I was saying. If you swap consciousness, you're putting that person's consciousness in a different body.
I understand that, but in that body comes with different ways to carry themselves. Like men do not carry themselves the same way as women do.
So you're basically just saying, like, in this hypothetical, like, if it was the case that all traits were swapped, you would vote for Donald Trump in Kamala Harris's body? But
No.
It would be impossible for all traits to be swapped, since in the real world, one's biology would rely first traits.
No, I just said that I would vote for Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's the first, obvious, option, because you like it, so. Can I ask you a question, then?
No, can I ask you a question?
No, I was trying to ask you this question, but Parker said that he would ask you one first. So now it's my turn.
Okay, well, I got interrupted, so can I ask you?
What?
So, do you agree with the fact that a leader should portray qualities of strength, of confidence, just like, strength,
I think that they should portray
those sort of
the characteristics of reasonable strength and reasonable confidence.
Okay. Now, then would you also agree with the fact that male humans are more displayative or more show more of those characteristics?
I can get into why here in a bit. That's fine. Don't worry, I got you. But before I do, trust me, I will. I'm not talking about this. asked you the question without intending because you told me that ultimately the reason I was saying
I guess it's not what I just said.
I answered your question. I said no.
Okay, but what's your reason? I'm just gonna say
I didn't get into the reasoning later because I wanted to ask you the first thing I tried to ask you the moment you joined the live stream of Games with you. I asked you if I could ask you a question. You said no. You would ask me a question, and I gave in. You asked me a question. Now I want to go back to what I was trying to say earlier and ask you a little bit more what's so scary.
okay, don't ask me.
I think that would be just how you scared, and when the ego gets in the way, it's scared. I love for exploiting the facts with people like you. But anyway, so did I ask you why you think a minute about it? You said it's because of physical strength and knowledge. Here's the question. Here's the question. A 15-year-old high schooler in steroids that can bench press 375 pounds in a trunk. Pretty clever.
Well, that's actually not what I said.
No, it is what I said. You very specifically said that he's a because of physical strength.
I did not say, I never said the reason why I would prefer a main league is just because of the fact that the favorite stuff is not.
That's the first argument you did. You said, I'm simply disputing them one at a time.
Okay, one at a time. Sure, beginning one at a time.
Okay. So you said that physical
So
strength. Since why instead of 30 women.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you take a 50-year-old that can bench press 350 pounds of a trunk.
No.
Okay, perfect. So what's the next reason? Disputed. Good on.
How is that debunked?
Yeah, because you're taking the less physically stronger candidate out of it to be president, meaning that you do not think that physical strength would be relevant.
Right. But are you able to? Okay, so I'm trying to think of a good example of this, but I said that physical strength would be one of the reasons, meaning that there are other influences impacting that, right? So if you say that, okay, if you just take two people that are identically the same, but one person is stronger than the other, then I would choose the one that's stronger. But that's false because, yeah, I said there's other influences influencing it. So just because one person is stronger,
That's what I said they're trying to say.
I think that confidence, right? Maybe not just confidence, but I think just by human nature, right? I think males are just better leaders because of the way they carry themselves.
So but what is that way? That's very vague and mystic. So tell me, when is the specific way men carry themselves compared to women makes them better leaders? Tell us.
I mean, I don't know if I can define certain specific characteristics, but one thing I do want to point out is the social construct we have of men and women. We typically see men more as leadership roles, as moneymakers, breadwinners, that sort of stuff, while we see women more as housekeepers, carers, that more stuff. And when you look in the eyes of a leadership role, you would rather someone who is more, let's say, affirmative or decisive with the action rather than someone who is always trying to care and nurture for another group of people.
Okay, so it's also like a load of mumbo jumbo. The words you said literally made no sense. But you said that you think that a good quality of leadership would be like more affirmative and decisive under stress, right?
Yes.
So obviously, like you think that men are better at dealing with stress on average compared to women because that's what would make them more affirmative and decisive.
You're just contorting my words.
But basically, like we're trying to be good at dealing with stress.
Right? Sure.
Okay. Well, this is a non-starter for you because women are biologically predisposed to be better at dealing with stress and other things compared to men, and that's because of evolution primarily. Evolution drove women that were binge stress in other words, that are equipped with higher stress and pain tolerances because of childhood. It's important to really because women can give birth. Evolution gave them a better ability to deal with pain and stress. And so this is biologically true. We see that in studies after studies that reference it as well as the National Institute. But I don't just have evidence rooted within biology that could make it. I also have evidence rooted within empirical outcomes that could make it. We have people in fields that necessitates a higher level of stress and stress management. A good example of this would be surgeons. 85% of surgeons are 15% surgeons are women. The journal, the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, in contact with the American Medical Association, did a study on 1.4 million patients worldwide over 15 years, and what they determined is that the patients who were operated on by women compared to men were significantly less likely to die as a result of their surgery, and they were significantly less likely to experience negative consequences. And this isn't the only empirical field that proves that women are more rational and deal better with stress, pain, and depression than men. We also see this in crime rates. 92% of violent crimes are committed by men, not women.
You snooze, you lose. Huh? Yeah, man. No, I didn't think you would fit in the refrigerator. That's what Carol said. What was what Carol said the other day was all that is it should be 16. Yeah, they're usually I'm single, so yeah, still a discount. Big discount. You know. Well, that's one I told you. Okay. I love those cookies. They're good. I love those cookies. They're good. Yeah, we buy a whole lot of fruit. It's all right. It's incredibly easy to do today. Damn, damn, damn.
After this 792, we're going to see how it works before we go into more expensive. People want to work better.
So, I'm going to check for the also file for Sunday. And it should be 16 plus 603.
Well, you need to put the foundation, buy a new radio. Yeah. No,
The time has finally come. Resident Evil Requiem is upon us. I've been playing the game over the past week. I've completed it, and I'm here to give you my thoughts on it. I'm Dan from What Culture, and here is the Resident Evil Requiem review. Before we start, there's not going to be spoilers in this review. However, I am going to allude to certain things that happen. Obviously, that's the nature of reviews, so please be wary of that.
All major plot points and all major reveals, etc., etc. Anyway, I just want to start off by saying that this game is very, very, very good. I really enjoyed playing this one, and I can't wait to break it down. So, this game is essentially two games in one. If you've watched the trailers, you know that we have two playable protagonists here. First up, everyone knows I'm a Leon sim, so let's start with Leon S. Kennedy. Leon segments in this game are just straight up action, and I would go out on a limb here and say that this game is more action orientated than the Resident Evil 4 remake. It's not as far as Resident Evil 6 in that regard, but there are some huge bombastic moments present in this game that sort of have similarities with Resi 6. But I do just want to say that this game is leaps and bounds ahead of Resident Evil 6. Do not get that twisted. But getting down to the core gameplay, Leon's sections really surprised me. After seeing the initial gameplay that was revealed, I was a little bit worried that his sections would be too easy because of the types of enemies that you're fighting. After all, how many times has this guy dealt with zombies? So yeah, I was a little bit worried because you are a badass, you have so much firepower. I was scared that it might be a little bit too easy, but boy was I wrong. The combat is very similar to Resident Evil 4, but it feels like this game takes it to the next level. One example is the hatchet that Leon's carrying instead of his regular combat knife. This thing has the mechanics of the combat knife from Resi 4, but it feels a lot more offensive. You can repair it in real time as well, so you've always got that option and you don't have to worry about it breaking. Again, I'm a Resident Evil 4 lover, so I can't say that the combat here is better than the Resident Evil 4 remake. It's just a little bit different, and I feel like some of the gameplay aspects are reflecting Leon's aging body. So of course it's going to feel a little bit different. Now let's move on to Grace. And the best way I could describe her sections of this game is it's Resident Evil 7.5. So if you like Resi 7, you're really going to love Grace's segments here because it takes what that game did and elevates it to the next level. And initially I was convinced that I was going to be playing Grace's segments in third person because the game gives you the option for either first or third. But after playing a little bit in both, I settled on first person. Because one, the game recommends that, and two, the overall horror experience present here is so much more satisfying in first person. So I played through this one on the standard classic difficulty, which is the standard difficulty. However, when playing as Grace, you have to use a limited amount of ink ribbons in order to save your progress. And this adds a whole extra layer of strategy to her gameplay, because you can't just spam save whenever you go and do something. You have to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more methodical on when you're choosing to save. And there was an instance present in this game where I legitimately thought I had stopped lost because of the area that I had saved the game in. I couldn't go back to the item box,
get my supplies, and I was running so low, and then there was a huge section which I had to beat essentially without taking damage. And after a few tries of this segment, it was completely kicking my ass, and I was really panicking here. However, with a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of perseverance, I managed to beat it, and I got great hold. And this just reminded me of old school Resident Evil. Those games didn't hold your hand. They didn't race the segments on classic difficulty. This game doesn't either. And I must say, if anything I died for as Leon, then I did great, which is quite a big advanced game. So what I was doing is start off the fighting with just a lighter and a dream having moved through the dark halls of the Rose Hills clinic. And there's some genuinely tense and terrifying moments here which I really love. But in typical Resident Evil fashion, as you progress through the game, you start to learn enemy patterns, and you sort of grow into the game. And this parallels Grace's character growth throughout the story as well. So as a player, you feel like you're regaining a little bit of control of the situation. I will say it does feel a tad jarring at points when you get into a rhythm of one character and then it just cuts to black and you're thrown into a completely different gameplay style with the other character. However, I will say it's very cathartic to run through a section as Leon after you've just been through it struggling as Grace and just mowing everything down and cleaning everything up. But I will say you're certainly not powerless as Grace, because Grace gives you the titular fire, the Requiem, and this thing just packs a punch. It sort of acts as a get out of jail free card as Grace, because although the ammo is very limited, you do get a couple of shots to use in case a situation arises that's a little bit sticky and you're backed up against the wall. You just pull this thing out and demolish whatever is standing in front of you in one shot. But then this adds a gameplay element of when do you want to use this weapon? Because you could use it on a big enemy, however, that's it, you use your shot, and if you get into a tight situation, you're essentially screwed. So then it evolves into this balancing act of using the Requiem or saving it for later. Okay, now I want to address the story present in Requiem. This is without going into spoiler, of course, as I mentioned, and that means I can't really say a lot about what happens. However, as the trailer shows, we do go back to Raccoon City because there's a strange infection that is affecting the survivors of the Raccoon City incident. And that's pretty much all I want to say on that matter. However, I will say this. Going back to Raccoon City literally gave me chills. Everything they do and every way that they handle this is sheer perfection. There are a few decisions that Capcom make in terms of the direction of the story that left me a little bit baffled as to why they did the things that they did. However, overall my feelings towards the story are very positive. So in terms of performance and bugs and glitches, etc., the game ran very smooth. I played it on Xbox Series X, and I didn't have any frame dips or anything like that. However, I did experience some small glitches throughout my time with the game, mainly some geometry issues and some clipping. But there was this one instance, whilst playing as Leon, the sling on my shotgun just decided to bug out, and here's an image of the sling on the gun. It wasn't really game breaking, but it did pull me out of it a little bit because it's kind of hilarious. But the thing is, resetting the game didn't fix it either, so I just had to grin and bear it until I got to the next segment, and then it sorted itself out. Okay, so here's the section of the review that this is a great game, however, it's not perfect, and here are some of my gripes with it, without going into too much detail. So first up, there are some forced stealth sections in here, where the enemies just kill you in one hit, and I'm not a huge fan of this in any game, so yeah, I've got to mark this game down for including that. And I think that my biggest gripe with this game is a short 5-minute section that happens later on in the story that legitimately made me stop playing this game for like a day, because I couldn't believe that this was happening. And without going into too much detail, it just wasn't Resident Evil, and I did manage to get over this because it was such a short segment, but I really, really hated this segment of the game. There is also the mandatory vehicle section that's present in almost every Resident Evil game, and that wasn't very fun either. And as a whole, the enemy variety here isn't that great, and what I'm talking about is the zombies themselves. Because early on in the game, we get especially into the zombies, and they display certain traits of their they have that personality. They sort of turn up and turn, which really makes you feel uneasy. But by the end, the game is sort of just stripped away, and the zombies just become grey, faceless horror. And they're just not as fun to fight as some enemies in previous games. It's not as bad as the olden from Resident Evil 13, but it is a little bit late. Okay, and that's it with the negatives. Now let's move on to the positives. And I have to say, the characters here are perfect. The writing, the performances, the motion capture, it's all fantastic. There's points in the game where the visuals, the score, and the vibes just align perfectly, where it genuinely had me teary-eyed, and I literally had goosebumps going through certain sections. Of course, there's also a little bit of nostalgia baiting here too, but I'm all for it, so that's going to be a positive for me. Because again, like I said before, this game just feels like a celebration of Resident Evil. And just going back to Raccoon City, we knew this was coming, and I think they do it so well. It's not really in your face, but I could see how some people would be a little bit turned off by this. But overall, it did work for me, so yeah, give me that nostalgia bait. And another thing is the boss battles here. Every single boss battle present in this game is genuinely perfect. And there's no sections where I felt like the game was dragging either, and I just got away from that game after feeling really fulfilled. There is going to be some replayability here as well, so if you're worried about that, don't be, because there's incentives here. I'm not going to spoil them, but yeah, it's Resident Evil. It's designed to be replayed. And overall, if I was to score this game, I'd probably give it like a 9.5 out of 10. There are some things in here that stop it from being perfect, akin to Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 4 Remake, which are perfect games to me. However, this is a great continuation of the Resident Evil franchise, and it just brings me so much joy that Capcom are back and they're continuing to just smash it out of the park with Resident Evil as a whole. If you're excited for Resident Evil Requiem, let me know in the comments section below. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed playing the game. As always, I've been Dan, and I'll catch you in the next one.
So welcome to my review for Resident Evil 9 Requiem. And this is the latest survival horror game by Capcom, and it's coming out for PS5, Nintendo Switch 2, Xbox Series X and S, and Windows. But I did play this on a PS5 Pro. And I gotta ask you guys, are you excited about this game? Have you been waiting for this game? Let me know down below. And I really want to say something very, very important here. This is a no spoilers review. Seriously, I'm just showing the beginning of the game for Grace and for Leon and nothing else. Because there's some amazing twists and turns in this game that I don't want ruined. There's even gameplay elements that I don't want to ruin for you. I just want to talk about the game in a very general way and give my final thoughts at the end, and also give a review of the Nintendo Switch 2 version. I'll do that at the end as well. So to begin with, you can pick your game mode. There's casual, standard, modern, and standard classic. And to get into the story without any spoilers, I'll just start with the beginning spoiler, what happens at the very beginning of the game. So you play as Grace Ashcroft, and you're tasked to go back to the Redwood Hotel as there has been a brand new murder there.
I need your eyes on the crime scene. Redwood Hotel.
And it's also the same hotel where your mother was murdered 8 years ago. And yeah, I thought that was so crazy. They're sending her back to that place. That's the beginning of the game.
Grace, come on.
And then Leon shows up to investigate the murders.
This video is brought to you by Boot.dev. Learn back-end web development the real way by actually doing it, and open the door to a new career on your own terms. Click the link below and use offer code SKILLUP at checkout to get 25% off an annual subscription. More details after the video. Alright, so Capcom gave us a strict 10-minute limit for these RE9 reviews, so let's not waste any words. Resident Evil Requiem is awesome, and if you like Resident Evil games, you should go out and buy it right now because you're almost sure to love this. But if you're not an existing RE fan, I don't think this is the right jumping in point. We'll talk more about that later. For now, here's some cool gameplay with some music behind it. Okay, so quick spoiler info at the top. I'm going to be very, very careful with spoilers in this video. To be honest, I'm just going to be showing you general gameplay, no major bosses, nothing that could be a story spoiler or even a notable surprise. Having said that, I would recommend that if you're planning to pick this up, just listen to this as you would a podcast, as the fantastic locations and set pieces in this package really deserve to be experienced in a playthrough rather than a YouTube video. Resident Evil 9 Requiem's tagline ought to be something like, "This one's for the fans." More than any other game in the series, Requiem feels like a celebration of the franchise, a remix of its best settings and set pieces. At times, it doesn't even feel like a remix, more like a medley that lifts and drops iconic moments so that you can experience them again. It's so self-referential that Requiem really not hit the mark for some die-hard Resident Evil fans who are more interested in seeing the franchise evolve rather than just pat itself on the back. Now that's pretty harsh language, and I guess I should clarify that I really loved this. I thought it was fantastic. It's like 15 hours to play through, which appears as 10 and a half hours on the clock after 10 movies and pauses or whatever. And I loved absolutely every single second of it. It's just one cool game that offers the most Resident Evil that any package to date has offered. Not in terms of gameplay hours, mind you, but in terms of breadth of gameplay, since it's essentially two games in one. It's horror game from the Grace sections and the cathartic
Oh my God!
action game from the Leon sections. Oscillating between these two gameplay styles makes this maybe the best-paced game in the series. The bone-chilling terror is stored up in you only to be quickly and satisfyingly released when the switch to Leon happens. And when Leon's spray and pray style antics throw a little thin, you're suddenly back to Grace, who's fighting from a big, scary witch monster reminiscent of the Alien Isolation gameplay. So I loved all of this, and I don't think it needs to be more complicated than that, but I do think that at least some of the chatter around Resident Evil Requiem is centre on whether or not it's a little high on the first fly, and it's too good to prefer what comes before it, rather than new. But I would say this is, if you've never played an RE game before, this would be a very bad jumping in point, because to be honest, key characters, events, and locations are very dependent on you already being attached to those things. If, however, you are a series fan, and you're happy for Capcom to just take a well-earned victory lap celebrating a series that's just about to turn 30 years old, then you are going to have just as good a time with this as I did. Alright, let's do a quick bit on performance. I was fortunate enough to be able to test this on 3 devices. The PS5 Pro, which is where I did my complete playthrough, the Switch 2, which I tested at Nintendo HQ a few weeks ago, and a PC. Spoiler alert, they're all a good news story. Turns out when you use the RE engine for RE games instead of Monster Hunter, things work out just fine and dandy. On the PS5 Pro, I played with ray tracing on, which gave me an absolutely rock-solid 4K 60 FPS. There's also a 120 FPS mode available if you turn ray tracing off, but I think that's kind of overkill for a Resident Evil game given how slow it moves, so I think the ray tracing option is the better one here. Absolutely flawless performance on this device, no frame drops, no visual glitches, no hard crashes, just flawless, love to see it. The Switch 2, I'll say that I only played a little bit of it when I visited Nintendo HQ a few weeks ago, but I came away very impressed. You can expect a frame rate of somewhere between 45 and 60 FPS, though I couldn't confirm the exact number. The trade-off is in image quality, though, since you'll definitely notice some dynamic resolution scaling and or AI upscaling kicking in. Having said that, it still looks more than fine, especially in handheld mode, since the screen is smaller and those lost details are hard to spot. Finally, I tested this on a PC, and holy shit does this run well. Now, to be clear, I did test it on a 4090, sure, but the amount of headroom I had when absolutely maxing out settings made me very optimistic for what lower spec hardware could achieve. For example, 4K max settings, DLSS off. I was getting up near 100 frames per second with no ray tracing enabled. In the modern era, that's kind of crazy. Basically, every game these days relies on DLSS to get it above 60 FPS, even on high-end cards. And here, RE9 is delivering nearly 100 FPS at 4K max settings, DLSS off. Very impressive. Turning DLSS on and even NVIDIA FrameGen are going to let you tweak this thing to deliver consistent performance on lower spec devices. And I'll also point out that there is a path tracing option, which is definitely worth enabling if your system can handle it, because it does result in a noticeable uptick in presentation quality. With the performance out the way, we can talk about visuals, and man, Resident Evil 9 is a good-looking video game. I won't waste too many words on it since you can see it with your own eyes. This is a real showcase of late-stage, current-gen graphical fidelity. Games like Yote and Death Stranding 2 set a benchmark for visual grandeur at scale, whereas Resident Evil 9 shows how much minutiae can be packed into tiny rooms or alleyways or corridors or enemy types. Spaces are generally small, and so Capcom's artists packed an incredible amount of visual detail into every scene, and then lit it with the most incredible lighting you've ever seen, especially if you're fortunate enough to be able to turn path tracing on the PC. Just a really sumptuous-looking game that reminds you what a good old-fashioned AAA studio can do when they know their engine really well and they spared no expense. Resident Evil Requiem is a tale of two. The naive Grace Ashcroft, who never could have imagined a world of such horror, and Leon S. Kennedy, a man who's long since forgotten what living in any other type of world was like. Resident Evil games have had their high points and their low points when it comes to storytelling. At their best, the reveals about the nefarious Umbrella Corp are tantalizing, always sparking our imagination about what else Umbrella might be up to, so that every new reveal leads to 3 new questions. At their best, Resident Evil games deliver memorable characters who lose personality the way the pustules on their skin lose unhygienic body fluids. I'm going to say that Resident Evil Requiem does deliver on the Umbrella intrigue front, but it's pretty weak on the character front, but others may disagree. Where it's not good is in the plot. Again, no spoilers, but honestly, the plot here is just a total nothing burger. It just spins its wheels for a while before suddenly revealing all of its aims in the final sequence, and you're like, oh, is that it? It teases things as it goes without ever building them iteratively, and massive stretches of the game can run with almost no story content at all. I'm disappointed because it had a really strong opening that's incredibly well told, making this feel like a mystery that needs to be solved, but it's really not. It's just generic Umbrella, up to their old tricks again sort of stuff. But there are a lot of lore drops here that tie into the broader rest of the storyline, so if you're into that stuff, then there's a lot to chew into. Grace, as a storytelling device, is quite constrained by her gameplay conceit. She's meant to be terrified all the time because her sequences embody the horror side of the Requiem equation, and she's also riddled with self-doubt into events in her past. While she does have her defiant moments when she's able to stare down a terrifying foe, she never really finds her feet as an essential character in the pantheon. Leon, of course, is Leon, and he's just the same as ever. I mean, no one dishes out a one-liner quite like this guy. Leon's presence in Requiem is pure catharsis, both narratively and in a gameplay sense. Narratively, he's our boy, and he's back. Yeah, he's older and slower, but he's still got it. He's a classic last-action hero, and while our view of him doesn't evolve in this story, it's just nice to see him roundhouse kicking stuff in the face once again. But in a gameplay sense, Leon is cathartic because he is the release that comes after the tension of a Grace sequence. And this brings us to the best thing about Resident Evil Requiem. Its incredible breadth of gameplay and how that breadth is deployed to deliver some absolutely unforgettable set pieces. As I said earlier, this is the most Resident Evil that's ever been put into one package. You got your first person and your third person, you got your horror and your action, you got your new protagonist and your comfort pick, you got new locations and some returning ones, you got some classic weapons and items and some stuff we've never seen before. It's all here, man, all in one package, and Capcom have squeezed every ounce of potential out of this formula. There's one sequence at the beginning of the game that really typifies this, and it's Grace sneaking around this medical center she's trapped in, and she's terrified, and there's enemies everywhere, and she's trying to avoid them because she isn't strong enough to fight them. She's essentially trapped in a big cage, and she's being hunted. Later on, you get to re-enter the same area as Leon S. Kennedy, and it's a complete flip. It really is Leon mogging the camera and saying, now you're trapped in here with me. And he goes around literally hunting down the enemies that just an hour ago were hunting Grace. The game regularly does this, showing you the dangers of a location and letting you experience it all within the constraints imposed by Grace, and then letting you cut loose in the same location as Leon. It's awesome. But it also must be said that the benefit exists the other way too. And what I mean is, Leon is a killing machine, and it can be really nice to take a break from that relentless action and then slip back into a slower, scarier Grace section. That breadth of gameplay and that pacing is just fantastic, and I think this is what Resident Evil 9 Requiem will be remembered for. Its embrace of all parts of the Resident Evil experience. First person, third person, action, horror, old, new, all of it's good, and it only gets better when you put it in a blender and set it on high. But like I said at the top, Requiem also fails to move beyond the franchise's history, and it's nowhere near as bold or risk-taking as Resident Evil 7 or Village were. Not everyone loved those games as much as they loved the original series or their remakes, but those were unmistakably Capcom taking a very big swing at what Resident Evil could be, and as such, I think they'll age really well, because they each deliver things you can't get from any other game in the series. Requiem is a retreat to safer territory. Characters we know, locations we've been through before, gameplay set pieces we've played, even bosses we've already fought. So I do think that at least a few people will lament that Requiem feels a little too familiar. Cynics might say it's recycled content. Personally, I land somewhere else. I think this is Capcom just giving the fans what they want in this, the 30th anniversary of this legendary franchise. In the context of that master, Requiem is kind of perfect, since it does feel like a celebration of everything that's come before it, and I couldn't help but be swept up by its confidence, its colors, pacing, its tense horror, and its intense action. I absolutely love this. I think it's awesome, and I strongly recommend it to you. This video is brought to you by Boot.dev, the best learning platform for people who want to learn back-end web development. They did a shout-out from the channel last year and were so happy with the response that they came back for another one, so a huge thanks to those of you who checked it out. Boot.dev's philosophy is a simple one. In an era of AI-assisted vibe coding, fundamentals matter more than ever before, while fewer and fewer people are actually taking the time to learn them. That puts those truly skilled web developers in a powerful position, since they're the ones that companies are going to seek out when they need someone who can actually get the job done properly. And companies will pay for that, and this is one of the most compelling reasons to check out Booth.dev. It's a platform that teaches you the skills you need to start a new career, one that pays well, and that often lets you work from home, and that lets you choose where you work, since so many companies are in need of skilled web developers. Booth.dev has dozens of courses teaching you how to work in Python, SQL, Go, and more, and all the learning content is free to read and watch, so you can sign up right now and start looking at it for free, no string attached. If you ever feel stuck in your studies, Booth.dev has added the training grounds, an arena to grind out your course-related challenges for as long as you need to help you feel as confident as possible in your learning before moving on to the next course. Training grounds add to Booth.dev's gamified approach to learning. It gives you challenges, rewards, XP, and even has leaderboards so you can track the progress and compete with other students. How many students, you ask? Over 820,000, and you can read reviews from many of them on Booth.dev's website. In fact, I really recommend doing a quick Google search for reviews of Booth.dev, particularly when it throws to people who have used the product extensively. Just a more positive sentiment from people who have both no coding skills whatsoever and extensive coding experience. And in fact, this platform can impress both of those categories of people is quite legit. But don't take my word for it. As I've said, all the learning content on Booth.dev is free to view, so you can sign up right now and check it out. No strings attached. And in fact, each of the modules is a free demo for the paid interactive learning elements, so you can try before you buy. True learning is all about doing, and so signing up for the subscription tier gives you access to the interactive tools and exercises. And Boot.dev are offering a special discount to viewers of this channel. Just click the link below and use code SKILLUP at checkout to get 25% off an annual subscription. There's a huge discount only available for a limited time. Plus, there's also a free success guarantee. So if you're unhappy for any reason at all, just get your money back, no questions asked. Click below in either the description or the pinned comment and use offer code SKILLUP for 25% off an annual plan. Thanks to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching.
Resident Evil Requiem is the latest entry in the beloved franchise that aims to do two things at once. It aims to satisfy and serve both sides of their community that they've built up over the last, it's 3 decades almost. You feel old yet? I do. To be precise, they aim to have tense stealth sections paired with high-intensity combat and action. And they do this with 2 playable characters, Grace and Leon, as we've seen in the trailers so far. Each of them have their own roles in the story and their own capabilities, weapons, and tools available to them in terms of gameplay. And while I do think that they are successful in most regards when it comes to utilizing both characters, after rolling credits multiple times for this review, I'm left feeling as if there were opportunities missed. Don't get me wrong, I really like Resident Evil Requiem, and I recommend that you play it, especially if you're a fan of the franchise. This whole thing truly is a love letter to the whole thing. Like, seriously, no spoilers, of course, but you should play this. So having said that, I do think that Resident Evil Requiem is actually held back by trying to do too much, and as a result, achieving less than its full potential. To put it plainly, I really like the game, but its short runtime and very limited scope leaves me feeling like I just ate one of those really fancy 8-course dinners. I had a bunch of small bite-sized experiences that each individually were amazing and remarkable in and of themselves. I love pretty much everything that Resident Evil Requiem brings to the table. I just wish there were more of it. In this video, I'm going to explain more of what I mean, but rest assured I will have nothing resembling spoilers in this video. Capcom has shared a list of things that they consider to be spoilers, and I will strictly adhere to those guidelines when putting footage on screen, in addition to a couple of other story beats and elements that I personally would have considered spoilers that I see. So don't worry, I'm going about this with an abundance of caution. That's also why you're not going to see any footage from Raccoon City or late game section, because you reach a certain point in the game where showing pretty much anything would be considered a spoiler, so I'm just not going to. But please understand that there are some really cool and visually stunning parts of the late game, but I'll just leave those for you to discover on your own. All of the footage you'll see throughout this video was captured off of a PS5 Pro, which is the only platform that I was able to test. Though I will say, I will have another video on Requiem running on another platform coming in the next few days, so make sure to subscribe to see that. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty details. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, all that stupid stuff that YouTubers tell you. Let's get into it. Resident Evil 9 is a love letter to the franchise. It blends the slow, tense sequences popularized most recently with Resident Evil 7 with the more action-heavy gameplay of some of the older games. Most recently, the remake of Resident Evil 4, which is one of my favorite Resident Evil experiences of all time. In practice, this blending of the two styles means that you'll be playing two sequences of the game as Grace Ashcroft that are in the style of Resident Evil 7, and then you'll switch at the end of those sequences over to Leon Kennedy for more action-heavy gameplay, bouncing back and forth as the story progresses. And I will say it's really interesting to see how differently the game plays from hour to hour because of this, especially because each character's portions of the game are designed specifically for them. So don't worry, you're never going to feel as though Leon could be playing like Grace or vice versa. However, I do expect this will lead to certain situations for players that greatly prefer one style over the other, where they feel frustrated that they're having to swap back. You know, like if you really like the stealth sequences, having to swap over and do the action stuff could be frustrating. If you really hate the stealth, and then having you find it really constantly or having you switch back and forth, it could be frustrating. I happen to really like the bouncing back and forth, but understand this is not all tense and slow. This is not all action heavy. They do mix it together pretty evenly. The early game is stacked with Grace's gameplay, and the latter half of the game features much more with Leon. They do swap within each game's half, but they definitely lean more heavily into one character for each half of the game. Now, this idea is not new to the franchise. Notably, in 2012, they tried it with Resident Evil Revelations, and interestingly, that game was actually directed by the one and only, I'm going to make sure I can pronounce the name correctly, Koshi Nakanishi. And fun fact, was also the game director on Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Requiem. So this is far from like a new idea to it. But I think it's also important to note, having said that, that Resident Evil Requiem was not like this magnum opus for the game. It actually, according to the game's director, started as an online multiplayer game. Yeah, I'm really glad they didn't do that. Apparently, according to the game director, they looked at that and decided that gamers didn't want it. And so they put it away and made the single-player game that we have today. And I will happily say that even though some people have suggested that this game started as an RPG game, there's going to be remnants of that, and it's Dragon Age Veilguard started as a particular game, and you can still play it. You don't really feel any of that, as far as I can tell, in Resident Evil Requiem. It seems like they pretty well and truly stripped all of that out when they decided to reboot it circa 2021 and target this direction. So I've heard people wondering if the multiplayer origins an influence on the game. I don't think so. Perhaps that's why they developed two very different gameplay styles originally for different playable characters or something. I don't know, but either way, I don't think it affected it negatively. Now, when you start actually playing the game, you'll be struck by the amazingly beautiful presentation and the stunning graphics. The motion capture is industry-leading. It has fantastic optimization. In fact, specifically on PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, I never found a glitch or bug or performance problem in my time with the game. Like, seriously, it was rock solid the whole time. Maybe I was just lucky, maybe this is just a PlayStation thing, I don't know, but what I do know is when I was playing the game on PS5 Pro and PlayStation 5, I didn't have any problems there. The sound design is fantastic, controls are tight and responsive, everything is exactly the way we expect it to be, coming from Capcom in Resident Evil. As I mentioned in the first few hours, we spend most of your time with Grace, some good get acclimated to the game fairly quickly. After swapping to Leon, you'll get a feeling for the gameplay, and some swap back and forth at a pretty decent pace. The story can even be captivating and interesting, even if you're like me and not really familiar with the franchise and lore. I've discussed the story mix for obvious reasons, since it's very difficult to use the game story with spoiling things, which I obviously do. So I would just say that I really like this movie, and there's some interesting stories. All I will say is make a big what you want when I found the story, at least the broader picture is fairly predictable. I don't think more specific than that. I would just say that you know when you're watching a movie or reading a book or playing a game, you just kind of feel this doesn't feel right, I bet this is going to go, and then you see that, that's what happens. It's not because I'm super smart or anything, I just feel like this really is where they're going with the story after just like an hour and the game goes. But I guess we'll have to see what the broader public thinks from the different hands on it. A predictable story is not inherently bad, it just removes some of the excitement that comes with a shocking reveal or a plot twist you didn't see coming. And to be clear, I'm not saying there's a plot twist, I just mean like, you know, when a story's predictable. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. It's just predictable. Encounter design is really well done, as we've come to expect from Capcom at this point. Gunplay with Leon is initially pretty frustrating, to be honest, with the guns feeling floaty and unresponsive, but as far as I can tell, this is because the game features an upgrade system that specifically rewards the player for active play, giving you more currency to spend on upgrades the more kills you achieve as Leon in his sequences. While the games initially are frustrating, clunky, and slow to use, you can level them up the way you would expect. And specifically, the lack of responsiveness, as far as I can tell, is because there's a stat for most of the weapons in the game that specifically has to do with, like, rate of fire, and when you have a lower stat for that weapon, it just means that you press the trigger and then you press it again, it won't fire until a certain amount of time has happened. So it feels like really unresponsive, when in reality it's the stat of the gun that's affecting that. However, once you've upgraded it, you can tap the trigger and it fires when you would expect it to. So it's not like a bug, it's actually a feature, but it feels rough at first. But I just want to point that out because I'm sure that there's going to be some people who boot the game up and are like, why do the guns feel like this? It's just how the game starts, and then they allow you to level it up as you go along. The monster designs and encounters are all really immersive, and it's helped by the sound design as well. It's incredibly tense, the lighting is fantastically well realized, and I think the ray tracing really does make a difference here. There's certainly some games where ray tracing is not necessary or is underutilized, let's say, and it's not worth the performance hits that the game takes. But in this case, I really think that they implemented it well. The game looks gorgeous, and when you have that ever so slight shift in light and shadow because a monster is creeping around a corner, it's something that's just hard to put into words. Like, there were multiple times where I was creeping through a corridor and a monster was just around the corner of a hallway or something,
And I could tell that they were about to approach, not just because of the sound cue, but because as they moved in, the light reflecting through the hallway bounced differently and started to shift the color of the light in the shadow against the wall. It's hard to put into words and describe until you experience it, but again, it's a level of immersion you didn't know you needed until you see it. And as you can tell probably as I'm describing all of this, I really love the first few hours of this game. It's really, really well done. But as time went on, I started to feel as though there was a real lack of depth due to the game's biggest shortcoming, in my opinion: its length and its scope. Now, let me be clear. Resident Evil has never been known for massive playtime hour counts or anything. These have never been 50 to 80-hour games. If you look at HowLongToBeat.com, which polls gamers and collects average completion times based on playstyle, for most people playing through the main story, the following times apply to the following Resident Evil games of their recent releases. Resident Evil 7 in 2017 came in at an average of 9.5 hours to complete it. Resident Evil 2 Remake circa 2019 took on average 9 hours to complete the main story. Resident Evil 3 Remake in 2020 took an average of around 6 hours for the main story, and Resident Evil 8 Village in 2021 took roughly 10 hours to complete, with Resident Evil 4 Remake being around 16 hours because it's just a bigger game. So I want to be clear that these games have never been long, and I'm not critiquing it because of that. But I do want to just be clear, my gameplay time to finish Resident Evil Requiem was just over 8 hours. That included multiple sections where I was going fairly slowly, specifically trying to hunt down the little raccoon statues, and other things like crafting materials to get more healing items, or going and grinding out kills as Leon to just see what a fully leveled up rifle would be like. So, without a doubt, I could have finished the game faster. I don't know exactly how fast, but I think some people could easily get through this in 7 hours, maybe even less. And the reason I think that's a problem for this game specifically, when it wasn't really a problem for games like Resident Evil 7 Remake or even Village, is because the two different playable characters featuring two different gameplay styles makes it feel like you're playing two different 4-hour game instead of one comprehensive 8-hour game. And this is a feeling compounded by frustration that multiple occasions have helped deliver ideas being introduced for further exploration and development in later chapters. A gameplay mechanic is introduced that has a lot of potential, like a light that can be turned on specifically after a ray of pursuit. I got excited to see how they would implement this, how you could maybe have a more complicated level using these lights to specifically funnel the monster into a trap to kill it or something. But it just never happened. You used the lights twice, and that was it. It was over within 20 minutes of them being introduced. You didn't see them again as a gameplay event. Other sections, like a particularly interesting gameplay sequence that I'll be vague about because of spoilers in Raccoon City, seemed overflowing with potential as well. But they're just never fully developed. In a lot of ways, it feels almost like if you played The Last of Us Part 2, set its world after the opening sequence in Seattle with the little open world set. They give you a little taste of a bunch of little bitty things, but that's it. And they never explore or build on anything. In a lot of ways, it does feel like an 8-course dinner, where each course is delicious and divine, and like, oh, I love this light mechanic that you have. Oh, I love this other cool thing you're doing in Raccoon City. I love this, I love that. And you take fights and all delicious. But at the end of it, it just doesn't build on itself. It's just a bunch of great little bite-sized experiences that never really interact or intertwine in any new or interesting way. But just like the gourmet 8-course dinner, you're still glad that you went and experienced it, even though your wallet is a good bit lighter. But at the end of it, you're still kind of hungry. You're wishing for more. And maybe it's easy to go back through and experience the 8 courses all over again to satisfy. I don't know if some players will do that and will grind out challenges and speedrun the game and probably get their fix. But I can't help but wonder what this game could have been like if they had expanded this game. If they had spent twice as much time in the open section of the place, exploring the nooks and crannies of a very confusing labyrinthine chaos. Or with Leon, doubling the length of the time spent in Raccoon City, giving it much more gameplay challenges and definitely more awesome. To be clear, it's a really good thing when you play a game and your primary frustration is that you want more of it. There are plenty of games where you're left doing the complete opposite way, in which you get into it and But I think the experience was just specifically frustrated with Resident Evil Requiem because it does feel like two games in one. The stealthy, high-intensity game modeled after Resident Evil 7 mixed with the more action-packed game modeled after Resident Evil 4. And normally that would be great, but because the overall package is so short, you end up feeling like you got half of two different games and neither of them reach their full potential. In the same vein, I feel like the game's scope is a good bit smaller than even a game like Resident Evil Village. The variety of environments, encounters, not to mention the sheer size and scale of the castle and, well, you know who, made that game feel much more massive and epic, even though it wasn't that much bigger in terms of hours spent playing. Listen, I really, really like Resident Evil Requiem, and again, I think you should play it. I just think when you play it, after you finish it, you'll be like, oh, I want more. Because that was good, and I want more of it. And that's a good problem to have. I just wish that we got a little bit of a bigger portion size. Ultimately, everybody's going to have different opinions on this topic, and some may feel it's totally worth the $70 price tag, while others decide to wait for a sale. My job is just to inform you that you'll effectively be getting two small but very well executed games in two different styles for the prices. And listen, everybody's going to land at a different spot on this. It's just a matter of your personal preference, tastes, and what you can justify with your money. For me, I really, really like that game. I just wish there was more of it. But it's important to note that I'm one of the players that likes both of these gameplay styles. I imagine if you don't like the slow burn stealth sequences, this game will feel like much less of a W than if you like both. Because you'll effectively be getting 4 hours of something you like, and then 4 hours of something that feels like. Whereas in something like Resident Evil 4, Remake, or something like that, the game is pretty cohesive and consistent in what it's doing and gameplay throughout the entire game. So, it's broken up a lot. But to put all this really simply in a nice, neat little bow, I really, really like Resident Evil Requiem. I just wish it were longer. But let me know what you think of all of this in the comment section below. Of course, if you have any questions that I didn't answer in the video, put them in the comments and I can reply if I know the answer. Thank you for watching. Much love. Again, like, subscribe, all that stuff. We've got a lot of big videos coming out soon. I may or may not just had the opportunity to go hands-on with Crimson Desert by the time you're seeing this video. So if you want to see those preview impressions, make sure to subscribe, because those impressions will be going up sooner rather than later. And until then, my friends, much love. Thanks and consistent. Bye-bye.
Simon in Virginia, you're on the line with Javon and Jimmy. Simon, how are you?
I'm good. Just to be completely honest and truthful, I'm not too familiar with you guys. I was kind of just scrolling and found you. So just so I'm aware before we begin any sort of debate, what are your exact positions? Like, what are your policy prescriptions as far as guns in America would go?
Neither of us want to ban guns. We think the proletariat should be armed. But I would require a person, especially for we would start with some brazier weapons. So I have an assault rifle that can do massive damage. It's not made for self-defense. That's what the shotgun is, right? You the handgun. It's a quick kill a lot of people if you have two kind of gun. And I would require people to certify that they are both mentally competent and capable of storing, using, safely possessing the exact rifle that I am.
Okay. So as far as the second part, I agree. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I apologize.
What you got doing? Any other policy you got?
Sorry, I was muted. I don't. Other than I would probably I would implement some type of system, much like I did bring the here. A learner's permit first. You have to complete a certain amount of hours on the training course. I do believe insurance should probably be required on firearms. There's not really anything that can commit a specific damage and should be insured. So that's what we do this too. But I think ammunition should be registered with the state, not just the gun itself. Things like that. Things that I think are like fairly easy to implement. That like would really abridge anybody's rights.
Okay. So the first part I'd like to debate, but the second part, as far as a background check, a more thorough background check, proof that you can hold on to the gun, things like that, I would actually agree with that. But my question is then, if we're going to ensure that people are capable of storing these guns and capable of doing everything with them, then why could we not even say, in exchange for the upgrade and security that we've now ensured, we've ensured that you can use the gun, we've ensured that you can store the gun properly, and according to whatever federal regulations you actually impose, could we then also agree that we could have, rather than take away things like you said, for example, that you think assault rifles should be banned, could we then allow assault rifles? Could we allow higher caliber weapons, even perhaps military grade weapons? Because I don't see quite maybe the distinction between why we are upgrading security and downgrading the caliber of weapon you can actually own. For example, I own an assault rifle that shoots in 9mm. I also own several pistols that shoot in 9mm, both of which are semi-automatic. So when you define something as capable of doing more damage, I look more so to the calibers, and if we're looking at calibers, I mean, they make things in assault rifle platforms that use 9mm, such as the thing around them. They make them in 22. So what specific guns then would you define as too high caliber, too high grade? I know this is a multifaceted question. I apologize for the civilians, the proletariat aren't.
I don't think it's that useful. Well, I don't think it's that useful for us to be the ones who would decide it. As far as you're saying the military grades up, no. Generally, right now, we're working with an already armed. We're not trying to put Pandora back in the box. So if we were starting fresh, where the limitations are going to be much different. Even what kinds of guns we're saying we need to cover, at least for myself, with all the extra licensing and insurance and stuff. I think would vary, or what kind of insurance and stuff. But whether or not I would then let a person who has demonstrated the highest level, no, I'm not going to take the libertarian position of like, yeah, technically if you hit some level of responsibility, if you can afford a nuke, you can get them. Where the actual lines would be, I don't think it's even useful until there's even, to start putting those lines down, until there's clearly support and a position, a way to go forward with a lot. Because I'm certain whatever I would tell you now, that line would get changed by more information and an actual serious approach to it. But we certainly wouldn't be getting automatic weapons. Assault rifles wouldn't be banned. I think you said we would. I didn't say that, but they would require a higher level of qualification to own.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't...
I apologize, and I must have not heard the clarification on what you asked. So then my question would be this. You said, for example, I mean, the purpose of the Second Amendment, in theory, is actually just with a level of militia. You've acknowledged that, and I don't fault you for it, but the previous gentleman asked then, and you responded and said you'd be bringing guns to a drone fight, and I don't disagree. But then why are you pro-Second Amendment if we can't have things that could, in theory, defend against the military? I mean, if they're coming with drones, why couldn't we come in with fully automatic weapons if deemed at a level of security that
we're agreeing with Second Amendment and that we think we're not pro. I'm not going to say that I'm necessarily pro Second Amendment. I think the Second Amendment fits in the job that I want, which is not disarming the working class. I think the working class should not be disarmed because then it's just easier to subjugate. But whether it's by the second, I don't think we have a right to own guns. Let me say this: I think you can say that we have like a civil liberty. I don't think there's some inalienable right that we should have guns. Like, it's only codified in the Constitution. If we don't like it, change the Constitution. Like, I'm fine with something like that. I don't think gun ownership needs to be a right, but I do think that we probably should keep the working class around.
You don't think gun ownership should be a right, but you think it's just confusing as far as convoluted when if we just
if we didn't live in a country, like let's say me and you lived on an island somewhere, do I need anything in writing to say that you have a right to gun ownership? No. Right? I don't think it needs to be a right. I just think sure, we can say right in the way that we're saying we need to have something in trying that says the government can't take it away from you. Right? But we also don't need it to be a right in the Constitution for that. It can be one of many other things.
Well, I think your example's flawed in that if we were on an island and it was just you and me, we have no established form of government. We have a government in America, and we have a government that has an army. An army that has one of, if not the highest expenditures of defense. They're obviously more wrong than us. You guys acknowledge that yourself. But the example that I would give is that we live in America. We live in that place with that very well... ammunited, I guess, not really a word, army, And so I think we do need it written in hard truth, especially in
it's basically a human right. You're saying we need it in response to the country we live in. You don't have to necessarily go with the island example. If I moved to New Zealand, I would be fine not having the right, because it still ends their entire news month when a situation like Christchurch happens, because it is so rare and because it is so obscene, and so they are in a situation where they both clearly care about the rights of the proletariat, and they don't see the need for the workers of mine, and they don't allow you to have military-grade weapons there. And so I wouldn't sit there and be like, okay, but I'm not comfortable being here until I got my assault rifle back.
Well, and I suppose we have different levels of concern about the government. I think that if you see the government just as the idea of government throughout history, every time there's been a tyrannical regime, the first thing they've done is take away weapons. I'd like to have it written somewhere that I have the right to keep them there on, so that if they're men and it's more difficult for the government to take them there, and then they have to go through certain boundaries to unacknowledge the fact that I can, so for example, in the Constitution is very difficult. It's written in the Constitution that I have to keep them there. So the bare minimum would make it very difficult for the government to yeah, it was not. Yeah,
if you were the government decided to violate the they're not speaking to it might help you post, it might help us post the revolution, seek some type of justice then. It's not going to help us when they come to the gun. I don't think it's going to help you when it comes to the guns. It's out of the guns, right? And when I would get where you have a bunch of people who work the freedom people, the bunch of people who and arguably the government hates people, right? But they do become tyrannical. Well, what is the current strategy of the current tyrannical government? They're not going to come for the guns. They are clearly radicalizing the people on their side to violence. So it will be those Second Amendment people from the past, those people who were conservative, those people who were like, oh, we care so much about freedom of speech, even as we were so mad if you got banned on Twitter before, but now we'd like you to be banned from having a job. Those people that are radicalizing toward the day they're not going to come for everybody's guns at once, Simon, and it won't be the left. The way everybody was acting like, oh, liberals just want to come and take all your guns and you can have no guns. Donald Trump has had more gun control proposals than any Democrat, let alone leftist, because there aren't any leftists, than any Democrat had. He's the one who started talking about, well, we're going to, if you show you've got a mental issue, maybe we're going to come for your guns. We're going to come and we'll just take them away before you can do something. He's the one proposing those things as the first wedge in, because he's going to be the one who gets to then define what a mental issue is. They're literally trying to make Trump derangement syndrome a literal designation of a mental issue. So you're sitting there feeling more comfortable because if the government comes for you, because you're imagining a military marching on you, and then we're going to have a militia to fight back and be like, no, we're going to hold our own stead. It's not going to be them. It's going to be your radicalized neighbor. It's going to be the tyrannical government, but their extension into the people around you. It's not going to be your guns are more. It is more of a threat that somebody, if you, I don't know if you're opposed to this current government, so maybe you would be, but obviously I am. So my guns for being vocally opposed, for hiring trans people, for spreading trans education on transgender, these things that they are so against. Actually, I kind of do it in your position in a good way. I'm not worried about the military showing up to take my gun as I am my neighbor getting away from murdering me, because people will be like, they're going to call you violence because they call it fascist and Nazi, but we only call them, communists after they get scared, pedophiles, even though we went to the boycott on a president, rumors, those kinds of things that don't go violence at all, because you wouldn't be a hero for killing a pedophile, you'd only be for killing fascists. Oh, wait, Trump called it fascist too. Simon, anyway, coming back to the point, I know I went somewhere. Where you think the danger is coming from is not
it's the government it's not going inside the house. It's going to be the people around you who are stopping the government. It's going to be made sure to go after the most heavily armed portion of the population to get their sympathies.
Sorry, that was extremely multifaceted. I think I understand what you're saying.
It's my autism.
Personally, no. All good. Personally, I think I would disagree with you. I mean, just on the premise that this specific administration is more likely to take my guns than the liberal administration, specifically because I could be mistaken once again that they did try and establish a registry, which, I mean, establishing a registry is the first step to revoking guns, because now you know where everyone's guns are and everyone their own guns.
It's also the first step to things that aren't revoking guns. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like you can say it's there, but Donald Trump has actually described that he wants to be able to, when you have a person who's mentally ill, go in and get the guns before they do it. And when there was a big event that happened down in Florida, I don't remember which one it was, there's been so many, but that was his solution. That we're working with the courts to figure out, so you can have a judge that can say, let's take those guns away. And talking about these people were on an FBI, they hadn't committed any crime, but they were on an FBI watch list. Why should they be allowed to have the guns? You can say that, but it's speculation on your part versus out of the actual mouths. Now, again, Simon, I will concede. I'm just going to go out and guess that as a libertarian in Virginia, you're probably white, you're probably cisgender, you're probably heterosexual.
I'm not Hispanic, but I'm Hispanic and heterosexual, correct? Okay.
So I think in libertarian, you're also going to be considered a sympathetic extension, even though you're now part of the imagination. The danger of using more guns, as I mentioned before, probably isn't very high. But if you're saying that your whole argument behind it is about the right to it, then you should be equally alarmed that mine has done it. The danger of me losing my guns has done it. Because they're going to be able to determine. Go to Twitter, buddy. Go to Twitter and look at basically anybody who has. Now it's going to be if you have a friend, because they're adding the person supposedly, we don't actually know, but Tyler's girlfriend was trans, allegedly. That anybody associated with trans stuff, because that's where the violence is coming from. Even though they're less than 0.5% of all the gun violence, of the mass gun violence, that's where it is. Take it from them, take it from anybody who has any ideology related to that, who could have brought it like that. They are clearly coming for the freedoms of other Americans. And if you, even as a Second Amendment guy, are saying like, okay, well, they are losing their rights, but maybe if they wanted them, I don't think you're saying this, I hope not. I hope you were saying you would march with those guns on behalf of them losing their rights, even if they aren't themselves armed. But it seems like a lot of people who are super Second Amendment people are like, I love the Second Amendment for me. And as long as my Second Amendment isn't ever in danger, fuck everybody else, I got money to fuck them.
Okay, so you've gone a lot of different places there. First and foremost, yes, I would concede that if, for example, the Republicans decided that it was on you as a neighbor to go and take away guns from people they have deemed as mentally ill, I would likely not be a person who had my guns taken away. I concede that. But I would then ask you, I asked you a question so I could lead into more questions, but my question would be this. Do you think that people, regardless of how you yourself define mental illness, do you think people that are mentally ill, so in the last segment, I get with the Sam guy, you mentioned, for example, schizophrenia. Schizophrenics could still technically purchase guns right now. They'd have to hide their schizophrenia, I'd assume, because if you were looking around saying, Batman's coming at me, you probably, the guy you're purchasing a gun from would likely not let you buy it, maybe, I don't know. Do you think that people who are mentally ill, whatever that definition is to you, should own guns?
The base phrase mentally ill would not be, because I have generalized anxiety disorder. It's not as bad these days, but I get...
You just can't pull the full brush. Like, there are people with schizophrenia who literally have never committed an act of violence in their life. I would say that people with violent histories that have shown they continue to engage in violent histories, maybe those are the people, right? Depending on the extremity of the violence, but like, No, I wouldn't say just because you're mentally ill, you shouldn't be able to own a gun.
Yeah, though, there are certainly, I would want a clearance of a certain type for certain weapons. Right? Whatever the highest end of weapon we say a citizen is allowed to possess, I would say the qualifications for that versus a bolt-action rifle would be higher. And I dare say even non-violent schizophrenic people, I probably would not. But I don't, again, this is the thing where you get into the specifics right now, it's premature and somebody might be able to give me, by the way, it's schizophrenic. For the most part, it only shows up in this way. And the delusions of grandeur, whatever, only in these versions of schizophrenia. By the way, like, I'm not a schizophrenia expert, so getting into the specifics. But if my caricaturized understanding of schizophrenia is closer to reality, there are probably weapons that I would say, if your mental clearance does not, if that's in your evaluation, to own whatever that highest level of weapon ends up being, wherever that line ends up getting put, there will probably be very peaceful people in a category who will never be able to possess those specific weapons.
Well, then my question would become, as far as how you classify, like, for example, the beginning being bolt action, that makes sense to me. You chamber one round, you fire one round, so technically speaking,
I can already tell you, negating questions that I don't know the answer to yet. I am not here to draw the lines. If you're starting with what, how it's classified, until it is possible that we're going to actually do it, then I would get much deeper into that topic. Right now, most of my research goes into topics we actually have a chance at affecting change in. And right now, the NRA has made it impossible to pass even things that we both agree on right now could happen.
But you have them. You said that fully automatic weapons should not be aimed at opposed there. So that's a line, right?
Sure, there may be a small it shouldn't be also. It's very similar to the extreme examples that most of people agree to, as though I have now, that means I've sat down and thought through where the specific line would be. In fact, that is an example of not drawing the line. In fact, to say fully automatic weapons, that isn't drawing a line, that's only saying the line is somewhere, and I do know on this side of the line, nukes, full auto, tanks, certain kinds of tanks. Sure, the things that are classified as tanks that you could probably
Also, I fully just don't care about the gun debate. I'll be honest with you. There's a reason I never put it on my topic list because I always just like, man.
No, it's just not attached. It's still
I apologize for the topic. I'm not familiar with the interview. I don't mean to be rude. I'm personally not. Well, I've gone on for like 20 minutes. I think we had a productive debate, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam.
Right. Have a good one.
Even up to the second quarter, you were able to make it in here. You put on the short brush, and never forget you got dead on happiness. Maybe got the drum on the decision tree. But I would do here. Should we wait for the rain? See Sheriff, you can see TV and get on those. What to do on this breaking weapon? This blizzard made it nearly impossible for even weather people to take selfies or even be seen. I mean, when the truck get stuff. The product got stuff. I commute this way. This is how I always commute Tauntaun. By the way, under Zora, I'm dying. I'm concentrating, but I and we have a fresh layer of 2 feet to cover. The Tauntaun shit in the streets. We were this close in New York City to having the snow and the dog shit going. I mean, this close. And God was like, don't get the big news of the week. As you know, tomorrow night is President Donald Trump's big state of the Union speech. But no matter what Trump says, it's not going to change how we government sanctioned, executed by so the rank of corruption of the cheering, elected officials, and God forbid, an American performing at halftime in the Super Bowl in Spanish. It's a feeling that we are one nation divided. Peace. Across the river. Great America. And we slowly, inexorably, slide the abyss. Fall. This country is saying everyone's that way. We can't recover from the loss of life for every day. It was so unifying. There is nothing that can take away from the joyous moment as other Americans celebrate this incredible program. Is that beyond your Cat Patel? Why is that FBI director? Why are they putting a medal around the neck of FBI director? Is Cat Patel a make-a-wish? Is that what they say? I mean, why is that? I mean, listen, and I'm not trying to diminish his condition. Listen. There is currently no cure for crazy eyes. Crazy eyes. But when you want to turn every picture into some sort of meth-fueled mugshot, are you telling me I've gone 90 to 25? I got to tell you, Canada especially, it's been crazy for Victor.
American pride, power, and patriotism on full display.
This is coming for America, not you whining little clown.
Masculinity and celebration. These are things that like have been completely totally stamped in arch feminist culture, like misogyny culture.
What a super weird he is having. But when you look at in 4 months, you go from no definition about hockey to, well, I like to watch them. You know, only hockey can save us from a dystopian extra-genetic future. Strange part is how the victory in a hockey match is being perceived on the right geopolitically.
Okay, all the way back to 1980 when we defeated the Soviets, this felt just as sweet because I guess since we don't have Russia to kick around anymore, Canada will do.
They're practically communist, so they're closing up to the
hockey is all that they have.
And you took that. That's all I got. What's with the star women? Why are we such dicks? And by the way, don't we in America have enough real enemy? Now we gotta pretend like Canada's way of life is incongruous to the West. Yeah, those completely best neighbors our nation has ever had. I mean, what right at the end of the little fight about beaver pelts in like 1789? Since then, but the more I think of the history of the country, what I mean, we're going to learn to different behavior. But the negative thing has to be some kind of miracle in lives.
Yeah, because it is. Woo! We did it, John. USA! USA! In the face by the red light blue.
Yeah, no, certainly impressive. Great victory for the U.S. hockey team. No doubt.
Yeah, but not just the hockey team, John. Same way we defeated communism in the Miracle on Ice, this victory proves that our system of government is far superior to Canada. As they say in hockey, game, set, and match. Outside, get the rebound.
Okay, look at it. I guess I'm about to the system a little.
Are you kidding? Our democracy separates executive power from the legislature, with the president appointed by an electoral college, while their democracy appoints an executive based on the outcome of which governing party has the majority. And as we learned on the ice yesterday, that system sucks.
It's actually actually pretty similar. I mean, don't vote the U.S. and Canada, 5 Canada legislatures.
Yes, but American senators are elected, while Canadian senators are appointed. Just like how Canada got appointed to another. Thank you. Here's another. In America, we have electoral districts, but in Canada, they call their districts riding, which is fitting because Team Canada was riding more.
Please stop saying that.
I will not. Another reason we're better. American Congress has a sergeant at arms, but the Canadian Parliament has an usher of the black bloc. And speaking of ushering up the yeah, I didn't like where that was going.
Yeah.
Same way the Canadians didn't like where that was going.
Go in Parliament. The problem has changed. The game didn't change the fact that Canadians have a better healthcare system.
Yes, okay, I thought so too, until I saw the scoreboard on private healthcare 1, universal Canadian healthcare 0.
That wasn't even the final score.
What was the final score?
We just didn't actually get it.
Steve, no, I did not.
Why are you celebrating in the King Bronco?
I'm in Milan. I'm in Planet Fitness. Oh my God. Anything to get away from my family on a snow day.
We have defeated our real enemy, Canada, on the ice. That pushed them to the country back in history. They live in peace. Okay.
The United States did war with Iran.
What possible conflict that we have with people is issues? Is this real?
The drumbeat of a possible war within an ongoing louder.
The largest assembly of U.S. forces in the Middle East that we've seen in years.
One report is saying we are days away from strikes.
It's there's a large supreme level crossroad. Months and months of endless promotion, interviews, manufactured intelligence. They got money to until finally, the rest of the world. That's the hope. But this year, my dad was nothing. The next day, we put it down the way with giant ship. Wow. What fear it is.
So the United States victim of this morning about it is nuclear power. They're probably a week away from having industrial grade bomb making material.
On one day. Oh shit, when was this mutate? Is it 5 business days to the bomb? The Buffaloes get ridiculous to the next program. Sayings about that nation's nuclear program being made. The word I was looking for.
Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities completely and totally obliterated.
I remember Trump saying we totally obliterated the nuclear program. And that made me think really questionable. Obliterated what?
It was a bit like nobody's ever seen before.
So the kind of obliteration that somehow re-obliterates all the rest of the media. Yeah, no, we obliterated that thing. Nobody left with this thing, you know? So is our plan now to re-obliterate the nuclear programs that we should place? Or is there a longer term plan?
The longest of the pressure which is what has to come to the table to negotiate around nuclear weapons.
Our peace is finished. With focus Iran delivered an Iran nuclear deal. We gotta remember that phrase. But when we made a nuclear deal with Iran,
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Trump obliterated it. So just to be clear, there wasn't one wrong in Iran to either obliterate the program Trump had previously obliterated, or the first time deciding a veto was the one Trump had all the power. It's all the chicken and iron part of the deal. Eating your own asshole. That's how Hitler started. There's some TSA coming. Do like that. That's what it is. No more sorry. It's it. Obviously. There's no more sorry. I've been used to I'm going to speak to a factory to make steel products. And I said, hi, nice to meet you. I suppose as President
I'd like to kiss you. This is a very powerful method. I don't want to get this by everyone. You can always tell when the story is true. When you continue to kind of get little clips to try to tell us more president. Such president. I'm not going to get the president. What I'm talking about the story. What else could this very real person who says, I want to kiss you so bad? Jackie has all the steelworkers want to kiss you and you're unbelievably protagonist. Well, read all about the official history of your presidency team of cheating rivals. As America stands on the precipice of armed conflict with Iran, Donald Trump is single-mindedly focused on preserving his wildly unpopular tariffs. Yet somebody finally at the forest day and remarkably vindicated that the Supreme Court today ruling that the President Trump legal tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act are unconstitutional. Wow. Of course, imposed mostly of his own party's appointees has struck down the Constitution of Christ. No one has they're just being schools and lapdogs for the writers. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those systems. The very patriotic repair to our Constitution. I think it's an embarrassment to their families for them to never do. When a guy who had sex with a porn star right after his wife had given birth tells you you're an embarrassment to your family. It's very important to come to this decision, actually. The Supreme Court just wants to make the decision. They have four arguments back in November. So for the 10 months, working through all the thorny legal issues associated with this case, trying to build some type of needle.
Some nuanced legal issues that the court has to thoroughly consider.
The court put it in the water. That's how it is decision. Stick the test. Trump doubling down on his trade policy, saying that he will raise global tariffs to 15%. What? Wait a minute. They are going to get the wrong one. We got to get it's spirited. We're going to stop what touch on. What touch? Hold on. But clearly there is probably something wrong with him. Please, I say this. Yeah, I understand. And it's your and it will be breaking by. Without these, they've decided he's possible. Experience. They designed the logo, the elders, the juniors, and the stuff monkey. Looks like it cannot be here. I could be looking the whole horizon and finishing what that's done. I'm sorry I'm standing my bed. So, just like you look me, that's it. That's it. Oh, it's all cute now, but when puberty comes, that is not going to be a stuffed monkey. It's not me. It's comfort now. 1 minute later. How dare you people come to your wisdom? They just kept going. There's got to be something wrong with the monkey, right? Not funny. I don't know what comes to it. Saving his most vicious brother from months of your work. If it's that we're trying to risk goodbye to a lot of people over the weekend when we announced the new hospital kit without a clue to Greenwood. What? Greenwood to be the hospital ship that didn't even go out there. But like one thing shark is even stupider than that. Most of the American hospital kits, mostly comfort, are out of commission, out of repair, not for the human of water. I know that's good. But they are supposed to be in the water, Dad. What are you doing? You're trolling the Denmark. We're charging everybody 50% more. We're sure we're going to force this neighbor. I'll decide for myself. Oh my God. Weird punch. America is the most violent city on earth. The weird sound of nobody wants to play there. I think that's why they do it. I don't know why. But I don't know if you can make this stuff with it. With all of it. You need to. There's need to be worried about who or what is responsible for the 9/11. At the time, a major reason was that pharmaceuticals happened to go into the country and necessarily to bring more in. So, this demonstration is to provide protocol and a single plan with full coordination with the FDA. But, that was bad on the openly discussed in newspapers. What happened when uptight TSA agents and a laid-back people official put the all together? Homeland Security Thursdays on TVX. But the larger point there, that this thing had been hastily cobbled together, very much holds. Because all of a sudden, everything that went in, terrorism expertise were like by the way, very great. It's not like they protect this whole, it sounds great. It's about the unbelievable of the blood. This is make this happening. Very good to do. Every program to do that. Well, we want to kind of hold it kind of touch up. It's never dropped below the gate. But also, the thing is, we're doing it with really good. Respect for your body. We have too much money more to buy a fucking second. I'm fabulous talking look. It's still very wonderful that like we don't be people in the car. We're experimenting and it's not that they were having it said. It's not for the experience of the executive of its biology.